All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Williams. I'm the Director of Provider Development. Glad you're with us today. We are following our new format again this quarter. So you've had the opportunity to review the notes in preparation for today's call. I'll remind you to, if you have questions, make sure to drop them in the Q&A, and we will work to answer those during our time together and then make available the answers afterwards in a FAQ document. We have several presentations today, including an update from the Assistant Commissioner, Heather Norton, regarding the Developmental Disability Services Division reorganization. I do want to take a minute before we get started to mention a few staffing changes that are happening within provider development and thank those team members for their contributions to our work. So the first one is Sarah Thompson, who is our supported decision-making team lead. As part of the reorganization, she'll be moving into a individual and family supports, community supports area and be continuing her work there. So she'll still be right across the hall for me, which is good. I do want to also thank Julie Palmer, who started a new position yesterday with the Office of Community Quality Improvement. So she has moved from her Team 3 system team lead position over to quality improvement. We thank her for all her work. And then finally, Stephanie Subetti, who is the employment specialist. She will also be moving into the same unit with Sarah under the community supports, community network supports area. So thank you, staff, for all your contributions over the recent months and years. So I'm going to go ahead now and hand this over to Amy Braswell, who is going to facilitate us through today. Amy, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our provider roundtable for April 2023. I have a slide here with our agenda today. So as you can see, we have a very full agenda this morning. And as Eric said, we did send out our departmental updates with the agenda for this morning. So if you've had the time to review that, you are welcome to go ahead and submit any questions that you have through the question and answer function. And we have some people who are set as panelists to go ahead and start getting you some answers. And any answers we don't have for you today, we will post them on our provider development website. Our webpage through the provider, through the DBHDS website. And we have uploaded all of our materials from our January provider roundtable. So they're there for you now to review. So for the rest of the day, we have coming up after I'm done, we'll have Heather Norton, our Assistant Commissioner, come and talk to you about the reorganization of the Division of Developmental Services, and then we'll have Maureen Kennedy talk to us about the CIS-A second edition. After Maureen, we'll have Mackenzie Glasgow from the Office of Licensing talk to us about adequacy of supports. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about allowable activities and a recent guidance document about companion services when they're occurring in 24-hour residential services. Then Eric's going to come back and introduce you to a new blended part 5 that's going to be coming out soon. This wasn't on the agenda that came out, but we will update that before it gets posted to our website. So he's going to introduce that to you. That's going to be coming soon. Then we're going to review some important updates that were in the agenda. And then we'll have a little bit of time depending on how long it takes us to go through our presentations to address some Q&A on the presentations. All right, so without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce to you our Assistant Commissioner of the Division of Developmental Services, Heather Norton. Heather?
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, everybody. This is Heather Norton, Assistant Commissioner for Developmental Services. I wanted to take a little time just to give you an update on some of the work that we've been doing here at the department around organizing the future of our work. As many of you are aware, we are in the 12th year of a Department of Justice settlement agreement, which really has focused our work for the last number of years. And our intention is to try and exit this agreement this year in December. But even with or without that, it was time for us to reconsider the way that we are organized to do the work here at the department. So we met and had some discussions both with the directors and then with all of our staff and managers around what is our mission in terms of developmental services. And of course, that is to assure that individuals with developmental disabilities have access to quality supports and services when, are they experiencing a crisis, et cetera, and where in the state do they need those services? When we started to look at what would guide our decision-making on how we organized ourselves for the future, some of the things that we took into consideration was function versus people. So over the last couple of years, a lot of individuals received certain projects because of interest, availability, scope of work, different things like that, but really wanted to organize ourselves in such a way to ensure that there was clarity both internally where people had questions that they needed to ask and externally so that everybody knew exactly where to go if they had questions about certain things. And recently we had 2 individuals who retired from service here at the Division of Developmental Services who were previous directors, Beverly Rollins and Dawn Traver. And so it seemed like the right time to really reorganize ourselves and get these things situated. I should also mention that our settlement agreement position also resigned. And so, we needed to go ahead and look at our entire developmental services structure. A third thing, of course, that we always at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services need to take into consideration is our function tied to financing. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but about 85% of our staff are reimbursed 50-50 through DMAS and because of the work that we do around the Medicaid waivers. And so we couldn't just up and change people's roles and responsibilities, because it could in fact impact the reimbursements that's received for those supports and services that they deliver. And then the most important two of those guiding principles is this idea of wanting to be a resource for all and a respected partner. Part of what has occurred as a result of the Department of Justice settlement agreement and some of the work that we've had to do over the last decade has really put us, if you will, in more of a auditor role and or accountability police, or you choose the phrase that you would like related to how we've done business. And some of you who have been within the system for any length of time recall a day and a time when we were more collaborative and we did things collectively and worked together to solve those problems. But because of time constraints, expectations, and different things like that, we were on a fast pace to get things done. But we're taking a step back and really wanting to rebuild our relationships with our community partners and be seen as that resource and respected partner. And so with that, we set up, next slide, please, 6 core values that really are going to define our work. And those are based on collaboration. So working in partnership with both internal and external stakeholders. So really, working to gather feedback, collectively solution problems that exist, and work together to that resolution. Also a focus on consistency, meaning that regardless of any of the experts at DBHDS you go to for an answer to a question, we want to be able to provide the same answer every single time, regardless of who you ask. Additionally, we want to focus on creativity, and that means being responsive and flexible, combine 2 words there, and always working to get to yes. That does not mean that we're going to disregard regulations, whether those be federal or state or our own. However, what are the ways that we can creatively solution different issues, work together to make sure that individuals are receiving supports and services, right? All of this goes back to our mission to make sure that individuals have access to quality supports and services in the community when and where they need them. Also, our next core value is based on conviction. So being steadfast, mission driven, and passionate about the work that we're doing. Ensuring that we are communicating both consistently through well thought out processes, that we are utilizing plain language, both for the individuals we support, families, providers. So, really getting things out of regulatory jargon, but getting them down to what makes sense. And then being transparent about that communication. There should not be anything happening that we're doing that you don't know about. We're updating our website as an example to make sure things are accessible. And then finally, this is really hard work that we all do on a day-to-day basis, both here at the department and you all in the community. And so we really want to have a commitment to recognizing and acknowledging contributions and celebrating those contributions. And so celebrating the good things that are happening. Several of you have likely heard me at one point or another say, my phone does not ring with all of the celebrations. My phone rings with all of the challenges that occurs. And so do most of the phones at DBHDS. And so it is very easy to become very jaded very quickly when you work at the department, and the majority of the information that you get are problems that need to be fixed. And so what we need to do is make sure that we're also focusing on the really good things that are happening out there, recognizing them and acknowledging them, so that we're celebrating all of the good things, because we recognize that there are always going to be challenges, but we also have to, like we always say in terms of goal development and working on our various different support activities, we need to look for all of the small wins and celebrate those small wins and acknowledge them, because that is what keeps us motivated and passionate about the work that we're doing. And so with that led into what is the new developmental disabilities structure. It is not that vastly different than what people are familiar with. However, it does really synthesize some of that work. And so what you see is the Director of Community Network Supports, which is was Beverly Rollins' old position, is Deanna Parker's new position. That oversees everything that has to do with individuals and family. And so you see the Individual and Family Support Program, supportive decision-making, employment, and our policy and compliance, which you may say, well, that seems a little odd, Heather, but it's not a little odd, because we want all of our policy decisions to be based on what is in the best interest of the individuals that we are supporting and serving. And so that is why those things roll up, if you will, under that little green section. And then we have the Director of Provider Network Supports. And that is your CRC team. It is your system CRC team who supports the community service boards, your individual CRC team who supports individuals and families. It's your provider CRC team who works with all of the different providers, and it's the regional support teams that really help to break down barriers and make sure that individuals are accessing the most integrated community supports and services available to them. We then have our Director of Integrated Health Network Supports, and that really focuses on health and safety. And so within there, that is still your PT, your RNCCs, the dental team, the mobile rehab engineering team. And we also added a behavioral team under the Director of Integrated Health Network Supports as we continue to advance behavioral supports and services for individuals with developmental disabilities and ensuring that they too are receiving quality supports and services. We felt that this was an integral part of that health and safety network of supports. What was previously the settlement agreement has now become the Director of Transition Network Support. And the reason that we opted for this transition at this time is because the purpose of the settlement agreement is really to focus on making sure that individuals have access to the community and different community supports and services. And so we wanted our director of transition network supports to really focus on community inclusion and community integration, as well as, maintaining the work that we've done under their settlement agreement, but really make that position more than just the DOJ settlement agreement. Anybody who has heard me give a speech around the settlement agreement before has heard me say, we don't do it because of the DOJ settlement agreement. We do it because it's the right thing to do. The DOJ settlement agreement was an impetus for us to examine the way that we deliver supports and services and to make sure that people had access to those community supports and services. The DOJ identified things that are best practice in the delivery of developmental services, and we agreed, because that's why we're in a settlement agreement and we're not under a court order. We agreed that we wanted to move the system towards best practice. And so with that, that is the idea of the director of the transition network supports, keeping our focus on community and community services. And then finally, the director of waiver network supports, anything that has to do with the waiver is consolidated under one office. So while customized rate used to be under director of community network supports, it's now under the waiver network. It's with waiver operations and authorization staff, the regional support units that oversee the waiver slot assignment committee, and then of course the supports intensity scale, which makes a determination for the tiers and levels. Now, I noticed in the Q&A that somebody said you have lines going between a couple of different positions. So the Office of Integrated Health used to oversee PASSR and OBRA, and so we're making sure that those linkages that previously existed continue to exist. So the Office of Integrated Health Network Supports is going to continue to work in collaboration with the Director of Transition Network Supports around PASSR, OBRA, ICF, IID, because the majority of individuals receiving those supports and services are individuals with complex health needs. Similarly, I'm sorry, I forgot 3 offices that are in black that report directly to me in addition to the director. So we have the WAMS Data and Administration, or the Office of Integrated Support Services, who produces all of our data reports related to the waiver management system. And the reason that we pulled that out from underneath one of the directors is because that office supports all of the different offices in the agency, and we did not want them beholden to one office over another or have work prioritized based on one office's needs. It was to ensure that all offices' needs are met. As I mentioned earlier, Dawn Traver retired as the Director of Waiver Network Supports, but has come back on a part-time basis to support us as a policy and planning specialist to help us with a variety of different tasks that she has a historical perspective on and has all of the information, and we did not want to lose that. And then finally, Developmental Services has a project manager who works with me to synthesize, consolidate, and coordinate all of the different projects that Developmental Services is working on to make sure that we are not overextending ourselves and thereby overextending all of you through our work. And the link between the BCBA and the project manager is because Nathan Hobble, who is the designated DD project manager, also happens to be a board certified behavior analyst, is the person along with Sharon Bonaventura who created and developed all of the quality tools around the behavioral services that we did. And so this is just making sure that people are still tied back to these projects. And of course, you'll see a link for me to employment because of all of the work that we've been doing related to that. And Jean, I agree with you, and we will absolutely update that because that really should say behavioral services, not BCBA. We had staff help with creating this, and so we put the title of the staff person as opposed to the name of the office in that particular instance, and we'll get that fixed. So thank you for pointing that out because there is no intent to exclude anybody. And with that, that is everything that I wanted to share with you all. We have, Tanya, an additional document that's in a hierarchical structure where the actual names are in it, and we will be posting both on our website. I, however, as most of you know, am not as fond of the hierarchical structure, even though I recognize there's a need for it. And so I really like to, when I'm at least presenting on it, show it in this kind of framework, because quite honestly, developmental services needs to work in a matrix type function, right? Everybody needs to work together. And while we have a hierarchy, if you will, everybody crosses over and works collaboratively, because an issue is not defined by the office. It's really, holistically looked at based on the individual and the concern that is presenting, which sometimes means that all 5 offices are working on it together. And so that's why I prefer to show this little circular vision of the division versus the hierarchical one. But the hierarchical one actually has names, so we'll make sure to go ahead and post that as well. And thank you all for letting me join you today. And I'm sure if you have any additional thoughts, questions, comments, or what have you, please feel free to add them to the Q&A. And we will follow up with you, as Amy said. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks so much. I want to show everybody real quick this picture of all of us. So at the end of, I guess it was March, we all got together and had an all-staff meeting. So this picture is all of us in developmental services who could be there. There were a few faces who weren't able to show up, but this is all of us who got together. And I will say, since we've had that meeting, I've seen a lot of these core values being shown in our large team. So it's been great. So thank you, Heather, for sharing that with all of us. And so next we have Maureen Kennedy, who's going to talk to us about CIS-A second edition. Maureen? You're muted if you're talking. There you are.
And now you can hear me. Okay, very good. Thanks, Amy. And I am actually really excited to be talking about CIS-A second edition. As we speak, I'm sitting in one of the suspenders offices, because for the last 3 days, I've been with both suspenders and our lead trainer from the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, AAIDD. So just to give a little bit of background, Amy, if you could go to the next slide, please. Back in February of 2022, AAIDD announced a project they had been working on, and they completed, which resulted in renorming of CIS-A. It had been approximately 20 years since CIS-A was renormed, and that renorming allowed AAIDD to update some of the language within the CIS and to bring it to more contemporary language. They were able to confirm that CIS was, in fact, a reliable and valid assessment. This brings us to CIS-A second edition. CIS-A second edition is going to involve and going to bring some new questions to section 1A, exceptional medical. There will be 6 new questions in the medical section. And section 1B, for those of you that are familiar with the CIS, we'll have 1 new behavioral section. DBHDS has been working with the suspenders, which I just mentioned, and AAIDD. And what we're going to do is we are going to ask our suspenders to start asking these new questions so that we can start gathering data. They're going to be called the advanced questions, and we're hoping, the plan is right now to start asking these questions on or about June 15th of this year. We're going to use that information so that we can be gathering this data so that we can make informed decisions going forward. These advanced questions are not going to be used in any way to influence levels and tiers. These are only information gathering questions at this point in time. They're not going to be visible on anybody's reports. They're not going to be, like I said, used for levels and tiers. We are only using this information so that we can make, like I said, informed decisions as we move forward towards CIS-A second edition. Amy, can we go to the next slide, please? So as we're in our information gathering period, starting June 15th of 23, DBHDS will be working alongside DMAS and the Human Services Research Institute, HSRI, to evaluate the implications of the coming changes of CIS-A second edition. We are going to be including stakeholder groups, which will involve individuals, families, CSBs, and providers who are going to engage during this process. We're also real committed to transparency. We're going to be communicating along the way. DBHDS will be posting to our website quarterly updates as to what's going on throughout the process. Now, let me back up just a little bit. Everybody is aware, individuals over the age of 16, everybody has to have a CIS. That CIS results in a level and tier. Over the age of 16, everybody has to have a CIS-A. So what's in essence happening is the CIS-A is ultimately going to go away and we're going to transition to CIS-A second edition. We're not transitioning to CIS-A second edition on June 15th. What we're simply going to be doing is adding the additional 7 questions so that we can start gathering information to make our, so that we can make informed decisions before we move to second edition. Our plan, once we've gathered all this information, once we've allowed HSRI to do the analyzing they need to do to help us make those informed decisions, our plan is to move to CIS-A second edition on June 1st, 2024. At that point, after June 1st, 2024, Virginia will move to CIS-A second edition and CIS-A will no longer be implemented and used in the state of Virginia. Right now, today is the first time we're announcing the plan to move to CIS-A second edition. I know there's been some questions floating about. No CIS-A second edition has been done as of yet in the state of Virginia. So that's really all I have for today, Amy. We are going to be announcing this at support coordinator roundtables going forward. So if y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out to regional support specialists. And yeah, that's it.
Great. Thanks so much, Maureen. Big
Thank you,
changes. Big changes on the horizon. Okay,
Absolutely.
so next we have Mackenzie Glasgow coming up. She is the Associate Director of Quality and Compliance for the Office of Licensing. So take it away, Mackenzie.
All right, thank you, Amy, and good morning, everyone. I will be reviewing the 3rd annual trend report as it relates to the adequacy of supports today. Next slide. All right, so in accordance with 5G3 of the settlement agreement, the Commonwealth shall ensure that the licensing process assesses the adequacy of supports and services provided to individuals with developmental disabilities receiving services licensed by DBHDS. Next slide. The Office of Licensing is tasked with monitoring providers' compliance with the rules and regulations for licensing providers, which involves monitoring the adequacy of individualized supports delivered by the provider. The Office of Licensing developed a crosswalk that ties the domains outlined in the settlement agreement to specific regulations. The domain of stability does not directly tie to any regulations for providers and is assessed through a measure of the percentage of individuals that are hospitalized or admitted to a REACH crisis therapeutic home who are able to return to their original living situation once the crisis has resolved. Next. Okay. A provider is required to submit and implement a corrective action plan for each violation cited, including a detailed description of the corrective actions to be taken that will minimize the possibility that a violation will occur again and that will correct any systemic deficiencies. The Office of Licensing has developed a report within the OL information system, which you all know as Connect, which pulls information for all of the regulations tied to the domains for providers of developmental disability services as outlined in the annual inspection review tool. This is a screenshot of what the report looks like, just an example, since the dates on this one were a while ago. It is important to know that the data is pulled separately for case management services and for non-case management services. The adequacy of supports report pulls compliant, non-compliant systemic ratings from all annual inspections and investigations consistent with the regulations outlined in the annual review chart. The report selects the regulations regardless of the status of the inspection, whether opened or closed, or whether the corrective action plan is issued or pending. It returns all results. Therefore, if a provider had a regulation reviewed multiple times over a year because the provider was on enhanced monitoring and the licensing specialist or investigator reviewed some regulations multiple times throughout the monitoring period, all of the times the regulations were checked during that selected time frame would be pulled into this report. Next slide. All right, we're going to talk about stability. So stability is measured as the percent of individuals with developmental disabilities who were not discharged by their residential services provider around the same general time of their crises and were either admitted to a CTH or a psychiatric hospital. The Crisis Services Office measures stability as the number of individuals with developmental disability who are not discharged by their residential services provider around the same general time of their crisis. The goal is 25% or less that have had to move from their original residential location. Data from the year shows the percentage of individuals who stayed at their original residences remains stable across the year with an average of 94%. This is well above the goal of 75%. All right, so this is the aggregate report for January 1st, 2022 through December 31st of 2022. So the aggregated data calculates the overall ability of the provider community to meet the individual support needs in the domain areas outlined in the settlement agreement. As a reminder, domains have a different number of regulations reviewed under each, which is why the total review looks different. The chart shows that providers of non-case management services were able to exceed the 86% goal of meeting the support needs of individuals in each of the domains and cumulatively at 87.52%. However, providers did not meet the goal. I'm sorry, next slide. However, providers did not meet the goal in the areas noted in this chart. These areas are tied to safety and freedom from harm. So the specific regulations where providers had difficulty meeting compliance included: 1, collecting, maintaining, and reviewing at least quarterly all serious incidents, submitting incidents on time, and developing and implementing a root cause analysis policy for determining when a more detailed root cause analysis should be conducted. Next slide. This is a reminder that the adequacy of supports report only pulls data for unannounced inspections and investigations. So the DSI late reporting compliance report shows us that during this time period, that DD private providers of non-case management services were compliant 92.61% of the time with reporting level 2 and level 3 serious incidents within 24 hours of discovery to the department using the department's web-based reporting system. Thank you. So steps that the Office of Licensing took to support providers in increasing their compliance. So the Office of Licensing continues to provide training to providers on the requirements for reporting incidents in a timely manner. Each region has an incident management specialist who is available to provide assistance and training to providers in their area. The Incident Management Unit will be providing monthly training related to serious incident reports and late reporting. Any providers who have received 3 or more citations in a rolling year will be required to attend a training or review trainings and sign an attestation form. In addition, all new providers will be instructed to participate in the training within 3 months of receiving their conditional license. The Office of Licensing recently worked with other offices within DBHDS to provide the minimizing risk training. The rollout for this was April the 7th, with the last session being held this Friday, April 28th. Based on the feedback received, it's been very helpful to providers. Additionally, the Office of Licensing hired a training coordinator who is currently working to set up an initial applicant and new provider orientation that will include modules on the requirements for submitting serious incident reports and completing a root cause analysis. The rollout of this is expected in June of this year. Sample policies and templates will also be posted to the website, which will assist providers in achieving compliance with the regulatory requirements. Right. As you can see, the Office of Licensing has developed a number of materials and provided training over the past year to assist providers with achieving compliance. We will also be adding the PowerPoints and documents from the minimizing risk training to the website within the next week or so. Okay, next slide. All right, now let's talk about case management services. This chart shows that providers of case management services were able to exceed the 86% goal of meeting the support needs of individuals in each of the domains and cumulatively at 87.93%. However, DD case management services did not meet the goal of 86% related to submitting incidents on time, monitoring service delivery through contacts with individuals receiving services and service providers, and periodic site and home visits to assess the quality of care and satisfaction of the individual. Additionally, the expectations around case managers meeting with each individual face-to-face and properly documenting all required elements tied to a face-to-face meeting were completed and appropriately documented. Next slide. This DSI reporting compliance report shows that during this time period that DD providers of case management services were compliant 96.75% of the time with reporting level 2 and level 3 serious incidents using the department's web-based reporting system within 24 hours of discovery. This is the percentage of reports that were not late. Next slide. Steps taken to address areas of concern as it relates to case management services. The on-site visit tool. Did we lose you? Can you go back one? Thank you. The on-site visit tool is utilized and serves as the primary method used to support used by support coordinators to ensure consistency in assessing for change in status and ensuring that services are appropriately implemented. Additionally, the on-site visit tool form was updated in November of 2022 to include a section to confirm HCBS setting requirements. The tool is required monthly for individuals with enhanced case management and at least quarterly for those with targeted case management. Training was also provided to support coordinators related to the OSVT in November of 2022, and support coordinators continue to have access to the Developmental Disability Support Coordinator Handbook, which includes information related to this tool. Next slide. For areas below 86%, the Office of Licensing will work in collaboration with the Case Management Steering Committee to determine ways in which these areas can be addressed in order to increase compliance, and then the information will be shared during a case management roundtable. Next slide. All right, now I'm going to share with you information related to the second and third annual report. So overall, providers of non-case management services are meeting individual support needs 87.52% of the time, compared to 90.7% of the time, which was the second annual trend report. So the ability of providers to meet support needs remains above 86%. The regulations related to incident reporting and root cause analysis continue to remain a challenge for providers. There were several areas of improvement from the second to the third annual trend report as well. The Office of Licensing has taken measures to support providers, which we discussed earlier. In addition, the initial applicant new provider orientation, as we discussed earlier, will include modules for these requirements, as well as submitting serious incident reports, as well as how to conduct a root cause analysis. We'll go to the next one. Overall, providers of case management services are meeting the individual's support needs 87.93% of the time, compared to 95.17% of the time, which was at the second annual trend report. So the ability of providers, case management providers, to meet the individual support needs has remained above the goal of 86%. The data collected through this chart developed by the Office of Licensing indicates that of providers reviewed between January 1st of 2022 through December 31st of 2022, that providers were able to demonstrate that they are able to meet the needs of the individuals they serve 87% of the time. All right, just a reminder, please don't forget to sign up for Constant Contact if you've not done so you can receive the most up-to-date information from the Office of Licensing. And if you have any additional questions or comments, please include them in the Q&A. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mackenzie. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about allowable activities, because first we need to understand what they are and where to find them before we talk about the guidance that recently came out about companion services in a 24-hour residential program. Okay, so allowable activities, what are they? So I know that when we do training on ISPs in Part 5, and we ask, what are allowable activities? Do you know where the allowable activities are for your service? Do you know where to find them? A lot of providers are a little confused. They don't know what they are. They don't know where to find them. And some of them have not even heard the term. And that's a little bit scary for us, because allowable activities are the activities for which you're permitted to bill according to your service. And any activities that are not listed in the list of allowable activities for your service are not billable and therefore not allowable. And then educational activities, so things like worksheets, using fake clocks to practice time, anything that you would see happen in a classroom, they're not allowable under any DD waiver service. That's pretty much because when somebody is an adult and is getting DD waiver services, pretty much, all the stuff that happened in school is finished and is done. So most of the learning that happens, pretty much all of the learning that happens in a DD waiver service happens in a real environment, happens in real practice. So when we see those kinds of things and plans, my jaw drops, because it is never allowable. So let's talk a little bit about where you find your allowable activities for service. So first, where you find them are DD waiver regulations. So we have a link here in the slides. When the slides come out, this is a link to the DD waiver regulations. And if you need to find them, there is a prospective provider toolkit that's right at the top of our provider development webpage, that you can find the link to the regulations and the DD waiver manual in that toolkit, or it's always at the bottom of my signature in my email. Or if you want to reach out to me, I would be glad to send them to anybody who asks. So that's one place you can find them. Go straight to the regulations, look up your service, and you will find the allowable activities for your service. So here's an example of the allowable activities in the regulations for companion services. Or you can also find them in the DD waiver policy manual in chapter 4 under your service as well. So here's a link. Again, you can find them in that provider toolkit that's available on our website. It's in my email signature line. And if you want them, I'd be glad to send them to you. And then this is where the example. So you can kind of see that there's a little bit more detail in the policy manual. So usually what's in the regulations and you pull it into the manual there, you can find a little bit more clarity in the policy manual around the regulations. So the manual is a great place to look for your allowable activities. So it's important when you start planning, when you're doing your service, to know what is allowable to activities to provide in your service and also what's not allowable. So in stating that, let's talk a little bit about this guidance document that came out. So this guidance document about companion services in 24-hour residential services. So those are those residential services that bill per diem. They're billed for the day, and anything that happens in that 24 hours is expected to be provided first and foremost by that 24-hour service. All right, so this document was finalized on January 27th of this year after a 30-day public comment period. So it is out for public comment for 30 days, and it consists of 4 pages and 4 sections. So the first page, which is the first section, is an overview of companion and residential services. The second page has regulatory references and then kind of explains a little bit about what it means. And then there's a table outlining of the allowable support, so allowable activities that can be provided by the companion aid. And then the 4th page are some examples of appropriate use of the companion service by someone who's residing in a 24-hour residential program. All right, so we're going to go through each of those pages and talk about what they say. So at the very top of the first page, it goes through the definition of companion services. So companion services means non-medical care, support, and socialization provided to an adult individual age 18 and older in accordance with a therapeutic goal in the individual support plan. Companion services are not purely recreational in nature and shall not provide routine support with ADLs. So it says that it's based on documented need. Companion services are based on documented need. Excuse me, it must be documented in the ISP. It's not for the convenience and staffing supports of the residential provider. So one reason why we were seeing that services were being pended or services were being denied are because in the justification, it was because that there wasn't enough staffing in the group home. And that is not an appropriate justification for companion services. Licensing regulations are that the 24-hour residential program needs to provide enough staffing for the needs of the individuals in the group home. That's not a justification to add another service. All right. So it's not for the convenience or staffing supports of the residential provider. Also, it cannot duplicate, nor supplant supports that should be provided by the 24-hour residential service. So the allowable activities that the residential service should be providing are ADLs, IADLs, skill building, community participation, medical appointments, and routine and safety supports. All right, so the companion cannot be duplicating those supports, all right? And then cannot provide routine supports with ADLs. A lot of the conversations that I've had with people say, oh, well, you know, they're providing supports with ADLs, but not routinely. Well, and that's not really what the regulations say, right? The regulations define routine supports as supports that assist the individual with ADLs and IADLs if appropriate. So if the regulations say that companion services cannot provide routine support with ADLs, it means that if routine supports equals ADLs and IADLs, then companion equals IADLs only. All right, so hopefully that makes sense to people. So it doesn't mean routinely supporting with ADLs and IADLs. about the definition of what routine supports are. Right? So the second page talks about regulatory references. So in the DD waiver manual, it says individuals who receive group home residential services may also receive agency or consumer directed companion services. However, the group home provider may not also be the provider of companion services, as this is duplicative. Furthermore, companion services must not occur inside the group home. For individuals receiving group home services, companion services may not be provided by an immediate family member. Right, so the first thing here is that the group home provider may not also be the provider of companion services, as it's duplicative. It's duplicative because it would be the same provider billing to do the same thing, right? The second thing is the companion services must not occur inside the group home. So the companion can't be doing their job in the group home, right? And then if it's happening for just group home, the companion cannot be an immediate family member, all right? The next thing it says is that companion services may be approved for individuals who are receiving, who are living in a residential setting such as group home, supported living, and sponsored residential, if the service need is documented in the plan for supports, and it must not duplicate services which are required to be provided by the residential agency. And then the second line about what does it mean lists out the allowable activities for residential services that the companion cannot provide because they'd be duplicative. All right, so that's the next page of the document. All right, the third page goes on and talks about, okay, so what supports can be provided. All right, it also says what doesn't. So let's look at the chart first and then I'll go through the things that cannot. As you can see, the chart all the way to the right at the 24-hour residential program, it says no all the way down because nothing can be done by the companion in the actual program, right? But in the community, the things that can happen, meal preparation. So, you know, if somebody needs support, you know, if they have, you know, you go out and you get something to eat and say they have a steak and they need a little help with cutting that, sure, that can be done. Access to the community, recreational activities, but that cannot be the sole reason for the companion service. Behavior support interventions with regards to the written behavior support plan. However, and this has stars to look at in the plan, if the person has a new behavior support plan or if the behavior support needs that without skilled intervention would place the health and safety of the person at risk, you really need to have a conversation to consider if companion is the appropriate service for this person. You know, that's an important thing to discuss because companion really isn't for high behavior support needs, right? Behavior support monitoring to ensure safety, line of sight monitoring is okay. IADL, which we already discussed, communicating with others, safety supports, transportation in the community, and then accompanying people to non-medical appointments or meetings. And that's because if somebody is in a group home or somebody is in supported living or sponsored residential, that is the responsibility of that 24-hour program to take them to medical appointments. So while it's an allowable activity, typically for a companion service, it's not allowable when somebody has a 24-hour residential program because it's the responsibility of that provider. Okay. So let's talk about some examples. All right, so here's example number one. So this is about Rob. So Rob attends weekly Al-Anon meetings on Mondays at 7 p.m. and he needs someone to walk with him to the bus stop and ride the bus to the correct stop. He also needs assistance with safety supports and communication, as others who do not know him well sometimes have difficulty understanding what he says. Rob chooses to hire a consumer-directed companion in order to protect his privacy from group home staff and housemates. All right. So here's another example. Jeanette is taking an art class at a local art studio a few blocks away 2 evenings a week, and she needs someone to walk with her there and back for safety, as well as support her socialization with her teacher and classmates. She also has to take her medication during class time, so the companion reminds her to take the medication the group home packed for her to take with her, but does not administer the medication. Jeanette would prefer whoever supports her to go to the art class also has an interest in art so they can discuss art and artists on the walks. None of the staff in her group home are interested in art. When offered a choice of companion providers, an interest in art was one of her interview questions. And this one's about Micaiah. Micaiah serves on the board for her local ARC chapter. She needs rides to the monthly board meetings and events, as well as safety supports during fundraising and advocacy events. She needs reminders to drink water and take her medication during events that sometimes last several hours. Often she needs support for community members and legislative members to understand her speaking voice. When offered a choice of providers, Micaiah learned that one companion agency employs a companion who is also on the ARC board. So she chose that agency companion. And now let's talk about Bill. Bill likes to play pool at DJ's Billiards every weeknight after dinner. However, he has a hard time knowing when his friends at the bar have had too many beers and it's time to leave. Bill has a companion who takes him to BJ's, plays pool with him, helps him recognize when his friends are becoming intoxicated, and brings him back home safely. Bill is someone who is truly involved in his community and likes to look cool. He wants someone who would fit in at a country bar to support him, so it doesn't look like he's a person who has a disability with his staff at a bar. He doesn't feel like his group home staff look cool enough, so he hires someone who knows how to play pool to be his companion. All right. So that goes down a little bit about that guidance document, the reasons behind it. So if anyone has questions, please reach out to your provider team, CRC, and we would love to answer your questions. But I know that there's been a lot of questions that have come up due to recent PENs and denials, but this hopefully explains a little bit more to you about it and the information that's in the guidance document. But if you do have further questions, please reach out to us because we would be glad to answer those for you. And now I'm going to invite Eric to come back to talk a little bit about the upcoming blended Part 5 plan for sports.
All right, thank you, Amy. Okay, so we have long been asked to create an option for a single Part 5. And when I say single Part 5, I mean one Part 5 per agency instead of per service. So if you're an agency that offers day support, community engagement, and group home services, creating the option for you to have one Part 5 that includes all three of those services. We also have developed a template for a blended person-centered review to go along with the blended Part 5. So I'll be talking about that as we go along. So this format was developed in collaboration with the Quality and Outcomes Committee through the Virginia Association of Community Services Boards and DVHDS. It was reviewed and approved by DMAS, but I will caution you to say that just because a format is approved, there's still an obligation to develop that content appropriately based on the instructions. So you're going to be reviewed on the content, not the format. So just bear that in mind. All right, so in May, we're going to be providing you with a sample plan and instructional templates for both the Part 5 and the person-centered review. We will do that as soon as possible in May and send an announcement out through the listserv once it's available. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So the sample starts with a one-page description for Maria Santiago. And she has many interests. She's very active in her community. She also does not communicate with words and has complex health and behavioral needs. So as you go through and learn about Maria, you'll see that while she's very engaged and very active, she also has some pretty significant support needs. So we tried to develop a sample that would be useful for everyone. So on the next slide, you're going to see that parts 1 through 4. you'll see that parts 1 through 4 are not impacted by this change. So the support coordinator will still work with the team to develop the outcomes at the annual meeting. You will still list the key steps and the services to get there. And in the sample that we're going to be providing, you'll see that Maria is supported by a single provider who offers in-home, group day, and community engagement. And so the blended plan is going to combine those 3 services in the sample. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So the change is actually very simple. We had to develop this in a way that it would make it possible for the reviewers to have a clean review of the plan. So if a DMAS QMR reviewer comes in and reviews your program and they're reviewing one service, we really needed it to be possible for them to review a specific service, even though they're looking at a blended Part 5. And so the way this has been reformatted, there is one primary change in the format to facilitate the blending of the plan. So up at the top of this slide, you see Provider Avalon Services LLC. On the existing Part 5, the service is also added to the top, but that has been moved in the blended Part 5. And so if you kind of drift your gaze down to the very bottom row here, you'll see next to the activity statement, there is a service, 1 per row. So basically each activity that you add under this first outcome, which is Maria goes into the community in order to spend more time with her friends, each activity would be assigned a service. So if you offer group home and you're supporting this outcome, you would have a activity row for group home, 1 or more activity rows for group home. Then you could go in and add an additional row for community engagement or for group day in the example. And so all of the services are falling up under that single outcome in one Part 5 format. And then you just follow through the rest of the row as you would currently. So we'll go ahead and jump to the next slide. So in the sample that's been developed, we're going to take one example here. So Maria eats slowly in order to avoid choking. This is under the domain of healthy living. You'll see that key steps include eating slower during meals and snacks, linking to a swallowing evaluation, developing and following a choking protocol. With the exception of the swallowing evaluation, which is provided by the support coordinator, Maria's mother, her in-home support service, day support service, and community engagement service are all addressing this outcome. And all of those 3 services are provided by the same provider. So bear that in mind. All right, so on the next row, you're going to see 2 activity rows, 1 for in-home supports in blue and 1 for group day in yellow. The activity itself is the same, so Maria eats without choking. Neither of these in this instance are skill building, but you'll notice that the support instructions or how to support are tailored to the service and the setting. So even though both services are supporting Maria to eat without choking, they're doing it in different ways based on the service and setting, and that is described under how to support in each row. So this enables us to add multiple services to the same outcome, even if it's the same activity, but those activities are slightly different depending on what service or setting is applicable. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. And one of the things that is a caution in terms of blending services is we are not currently at a stage where we can include nursing services, whether it's skilled or private duty, crisis support services, or therapeutic consultation into the blended Part 5. And part of the reason for that is this is a first draft of the format. We want to see how it goes. The nature of those services are critical, and we need to ensure that they're documented accurately. And we don't want to lose things related to these services. Now, we have confirmed with DMAS that we can revisit this at a later date, pending the success of the use of the Part 5. So if folks are, adapting it and using it correctly, and we feel good about it, then we can revisit including these services at a later date. All right, we'll go on to the next slide and talk for a moment about the blended person-centered review. You'll notice the format of this has kind of been restructured. And part of the restructuring of this was to ease entry. So it's a little bit less complicated if you're in a Word document to just add a row when you have 2 columns. So we've tried to simplify the additions here, but you'll notice that the outcome is added there at the top. Desired outcome, Maria goes into the community in order to spend more time with her friends. You have the status of the outcome on the left-hand side with the achieved, on track, limited, or no progress, as well as the status description, and then plan updates, if needed, are described on the right-hand side in that column. So it's a simplified version of the person-centered review, but also set up in a way that you could add multiple rows under a single outcome for multiple services. Right. And the last thing I'll say before closing here, I think that might be the last slide. The last thing I'll say before closing is we did meet with the FEI, the WAMS vendor, in the development of this format to make sure that it is something that could be adapted electronically. So, you know, in coming months, if we find that it's working well and it's something that is beneficial to providers, we can have continued conversations here at central office and with the WAMS vendor to explore the idea of building this out in the WAMS system for those of you who want the option directly in WAMS. As it's released in May, it will just be a Word document. So you basically will be completing this and uploading it under modified use method in using the Part 5. And if you need to differentiate between complete use method and modified use method, take a look at the WAMS user guide where those options are described. But initially, it will only be an option if you are using the modified use method of WAMS and not using WAMS completely. All right, I think that might sum it up. So thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Eric. There are actually a few questions in the Q&A, and I don't know if you want to address them now real quick before I go on to the other important updates.
All right, so let me take a look here. So will the blended Part 5 have the option for employment, workplace assistance and supported employment? Yes. So the only services that are being excluded are the ones listed in red on this slide. What happens when the provider has 2 NPI numbers? So right now, because this is not built into the WAMS system, it's not that complex, right? So because it's in a Word document, I mean, you would still use WAMS the way you do currently for your different services. And you would do the brief summary statement under modified use, and your full plan for both of those services could be in the Word document and uploaded as an attachment. When will Part 5 be available for providers and the person-centered review? And so we're going to send that out through the listserv as soon as possible in May. We do need to go ahead and make sure that we format the instructional template properly, and that's the last step in terms of making it available. The sample is ready now. If the individual goes to day support and they live in a group home, but the day support is offsite, do we have to have 2 rows for group and day support? Is that optional or mandatory? So I'm not sure I'm answering this correctly. So if you using the blended Part 5 is an option for providers, you are not required to use it. So if you want to continue as a provider to have 1 plan for day support and 1 plan for group home, you certainly can do that. This is just creating an option for those providers who want to add both services to the same Part 5. And if you do, then you would need to have separate rows, 1 for each service, for each activity that is developed under each outcome.
And I don't know if they're asking, I mean, this is for 1 provider, so you wouldn't be working together as multiple providers to do one document.
Right. Yeah, it would have to be the same agency offering both services. Yeah. Do providers have to change over to the blended Part 5, or can providers? So yes, I just answered that. You can continue to use individual plans. Given the blended Part 5 and PCR, will there be latitude with DMAS as reviewers become familiar with the change as well as the providers? Yes, so we meet with QMR on a quarterly basis. We will continue to assess how the use of this is going, and we can do that here in this forum as well. So we can come back and talk about how it's going at the roundtables going forward. So it means, okay, so it means yes, if the service is provided in the community, no, if it's being provided, okay,
That's in regards to
all right.
my
perfect.
presentation.
Yeah, okay. Can the provider hire individual family member as a DSP? So I see Michelle is answering that one. That's a bit of a different question, not related to this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try to look for the ones. Can we still use the current part 5 until May 1? So part 5 is not impacted by version 3.4 of the ISP. So yes, you would.
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, yeah, so you can continue to use the current part 5 through May 1st, and you can continue to use the current part 5 after May 1st. Again, this is just an option. And I mentioned we'll roll it out in May. Can still use separate plans, yes. Yes, you could blend 2 day services into one plan and use a separate plan for residential services. That would be an option as well. Okay, all right. I think that looks like it for now. Please continue to drop your questions in and we'll get those out to you, either answered today in the chat or out with the answers afterwards.
All right, thank you, Eric. So once again, before I go into the other important updates, I want to remind you to refer to the agenda that was set out for full departmental updates. So I'm not going to go over everything, but I want to draw your attention to some very important ones. So I want to have you all to please discard any DBHDS Part 5 templates that are dated prior to 4/7/22. And this is what the 4/7/22 template looks like. Templates prior to this date do not contain sufficient information and are thus unacceptable. This template mirrors what is in WAMS. So if you are creating your own template, please make sure it includes all the same information that WAMS is asking for, because when you do modified use, you only have to put certain information in WAMS and then you upload your own Part 5 template. And we have our DBHDS template if you would like to use it, but it needs to still have the same elements that are in the Part 5 that's available in WAMS. So please discard any templates that are prior to this. So there's a 2015 template that's going around out there that people are still using, and y'all, it's 2023. Okay, so please get rid of the 2015 template. And if you are using the DBHDS template, please start using this one. ISP version 3.4 goes live on May 2nd. Webinars were held in early April, and you can find the recording online on YouTube, and we have the link here, and it's also in the agenda that went out. We also released a new search feature for finding behaviorists under the developmental services website. The link is in the agenda. So first, what you do is you go to the link in the website. And so there's 2 steps. First, you go to locating providers for therapeutic behavioral consultation, and you click there. And after you click there, there's this place in red that says starting March 2023, DBHDS is providing the following search engine to locate behaviorists that deliver the service. And then you click on search engine, and that'll bring you right to the search engine. Also, the Office of Integrated Health Supports Network offers a narrated version of the layperson's training for responding to deadly opioid overdose emergencies. And it's called Revive, and it's available on the Commonwealth of Virginia Learning Center to provider agencies in the Commonwealth. This is very helpful training for anyone who is taking any kind of opioid medication. And so it's available on the Commonwealth of Virginia Learning Center. And I do have a link here because the instructions have changed to access the Commonwealth of Virginia Learning Center. For those of you who have tried to access it recently, you may have had trouble accessing it, or have noticed it looks a little differently trying to get on there. So the most recent information on how to create an account or how to access an account that you haven't accessed recently, you can get to through our centralized training webpage under the required training. So a link is here. I wonder if there's a way to get it in the chat, but I'll find a way to get it out there. All right, so I also want to call your attention to the list of common QMR citations for providers in the provider roundtable agenda that was sent out, and make sure that you're meeting those requirements in your own program to avoid your own citations, because we do see the same things over and over again, and we do put them in the roundtable agenda every time. And so please go through them and make sure that you are meeting those requirements. And if you have questions about them, please reach out to us. We would love to help you get the information that you need to put those things in place to avoid those citations. You know, it's always best to, you know, to put the things in place beforehand so you can avoid the citation instead of having to you know, do it on the tail end and after having the citation. So we would like to help you to avoid it at all costs. All right. And then for our person-centered moment today, I came across this video. I wanted to share it with everyone. And this video came up and it reminded me of why it's so important to have a person choose their own skill building activities that they want to work on, instead of us choosing skill building activities for the person. It is just so important that people have buy-in and are working on things that they're interested in, because if we're making up arbitrary things for people to work on, they're not going to want to do it and just give up. So hopefully this this comes through. I'm going to turn up the volume here. Oops. Oh no, I was just told there was no audio. Ah. So did no one get any of that? Oh, boo. Okay, I think you need to share sound in the Zoom menu settings. Okay. I have a couple minutes, so I'm going to try to reshare this so we can get some sound. Advanced sharing options. That might be an Eric setting. Let me unshare or stop sharing, and I'll try again. Share sound optimized for video clip. Okay, I'm going to try this again. I'm sorry, everyone. Saw the video, but you didn't hear it. I'm going to try again. Let me know if you can hear it.
What's going on, sir? Sure is a nice day for the park today. It sure is. Hey, listen, before you go in there with your child, I've seen you here a few times before, and I decided to create a plan for you. Huh? A plan? What kind of plan? I've noticed that you enjoy hanging out with your child. I noticed that you get on your cell phone occasionally. So the plan is you have to make sure that your cell phone stays in your pocket the whole time, and you have to walk up to two parents you don't know and initiate a conversation. Wait, what? That's ridiculous. Well, that's not the only thing in the plan, sir. You have to make sure that you sustain eye contact for at least 3 seconds per conversation exchange. You have to ask follow-up questions, and it can't be about a topic that you want to talk about. It has to be non-preferred. You know, something like Vanderpump Rules. Oh, dear God, not Vanderpump Rules. Don't you think that's going to give me more stress and more anxiety? And it's going to teach me that my way of communicating is not okay? Sir, I don't know if you're aware, but that kind of attitude is what leads to behavior intervention plans for non-compliance. Junior, let's get out of here. This guy's forcing me to make eye contact and chit chat about Vanderpump Rules. I'm never coming back to this park.
Anyway, I thought that that was interesting to share because we talk all the time in our trainings. I don't know who of you have come to our Part 5 trainings, but we talk about, that it's so important for individuals to be part of choosing their own skill building activities, for it to be something that they want to work on. If somebody's not interested in learning how to brush their teeth by the time they're an adult, they're probably never going to be interested in learning how to do that. And they might just need some support and it be a routine activity. So, I thought about how, saw this video and it's like, if the tables were turned and it was us and somebody forcing a skill building activity on us that we weren't interested in, how would we react to it? So I just wanted to share that video with everyone today. All right, so I started.
What's going on, sir? Sure is a
Sorry
nice.
about that. So let's look at some Q&A that might still be in here. Okay, so what happens when start dates for several services but the same provider are different? Ooh, that's a good question. Is Eric still in here?
I'm here. So basically what you would want to do is when you add or modify the service, you would want to ensure that there is a revision date on the updated Part 5 and that all services have a copy of that. So basically you're just revising with a new date your Part 5.
Okay. Are there printed guidelines or how-tos for the blended Part 5?
So we are going to do the instructional template like we did for the existing Part 5. We're going to have the type over instructions just follow the same format, and we will add clarifying statements and help in that instructional template in the instructions.
Okay, great, thank you. Clarify, our agency offers more than one service. When we have an individual with more than one service, we separate the caseload for a group day and a separate case record for community engagement. Many of the documents are included. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, so there was a related question that I answered. Basically, the question was, if we maintain separate records, how do we handle that? And so basically, you would put the same Part 5 in both records. So that blended Part 5 applies to both services. And if the record is reviewed for a certain service, then the reviewer will know to look at the rows that apply to the service being reviewed. So if it's available in both records, it would be available for review for that service.
There's a question that says, is the requirement still at least one skill builder per individual? I know they can have more if they want. So I want you to think about this is, depending on your service, you need to justify the hours and the time for your service. So, is one skill builder going to justify the time for your service? Is it an hourly service? You need to have skill builders that the person wants to work on, but just one skill builder might not be enough to justify the hours of your service, or if it's a per diem service. So you do need to work with the person on skill builders that they want to work on, but I don't believe that one will be enough to justify your time. So we can't really say how many are enough for each person. I just don't think that one would cut it. I don't know if Eric would want to add to that, but I wouldn't say that one is enough.
Yeah, no, I definitely think based on the person, if the person is really active and interested and wants to learn a lot of things, I would question why they only have one skill builder if it's not really who they are. If they really want to learn a lot of things, then why aren't you attempting more things? So.
Is it okay to fax medical professional visit forms with the quarterly instead of typing all the info on the quarterly simply see. No, that is not, that's not enough, because your quarterly should be a summary of what is happening, what is going on. You know, is the person making progress towards the outcome? So you need to be specifically including information relating to the outcomes in the plan. So you don't want to just fax a bunch of information and what happened. You want to summarize what's happened, you know, progress, you know, has the person met, you know, their outcomes for the quarter. You know, you don't just want to send in a bunch of information. It's kind of a shortcut way if you do it that. You should be compiling all that information in your quarterly. All right, going down all these. We're entering medication side effects in our EHR, but need to do it somewhere else and not just the EHR. All right, that's a support coordinator asking the question.
Right, so the WAMS ISP that will launch on May 2nd, which is version 3.4, the data label for medications has been updated to state location where side effect information is stored and accessible. And so it is clarified in the ISP that you can point to your EHR or a certain tab in a paper record or wherever the person reading the parts 1 through 4 can find that information at your CSP. You want to include that location or that practice as a statement in the essential information under medication. So that data label should help clarify some of the confusion.
Okay, and I think that that's the same question that Michelle Elliott's asking. I'm gonna include that. So her question is, under number 4, person-centered section, what would be sufficient where medication side effects are kept? Providers usually have their own information and will request from the support coordinator if they need the side effect information. Are you asking that we put the side effects into WAMS? We already keep the side effect and list of medication in the client EHR. So are you asking to put it in both places? So that was.
Right, yeah, I think, no, just point in the part 2, the location where it is stored, so it can be found if needed. Yeah.
Does DMAS still require a DSP to be fully vaccinated? I don't believe we have the answer to that question.
No, but we will get that answer from Integrated Health.
Actually, Kay, are you still on with us? Do you know the answer?
I am here, but no, I also do not know the answer, so I'll have to look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions? That's all that was in our queue. All right. Well, thank you all so very much. We've enjoyed having you today. And if you have any other remaining questions, please reach out to your community resource consultant and we would either get you the answer you need or we'll be glad to point you in the right direction. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Take care.